Hello fellow space engineers, this is Marcelo from ACFM Gaming, and today I want to show you the Monitor Class Heavy Corvette. This ship is by Bored Arsonist. He's a fellow YouTuber and creator of awesome designs, like the rotor-operated heavy turret Phalanx. Now let's go over the characteristics of the ship and what you saw about the performance during the intro section of the video. The first thing to notice is that, of course, as the name implies, its classification is of a Corvette. It's a large grid, a small ship. It has a thin hull design and weapons that can fully fire forwards, but only the defensive Gatling turrets can fire backwards, which means this ship is going to be facing towards enemy. Its main weapon, or its main player control weapon, is this rocket launcher. It is supported by this Gatling turret and the 4 additional missile turrets. Now, the ship is designed as a heavy defense platform to escort heavier capital ships. Its main target are fighters and other corvettes. Now, because of that, the majority of the mass of this vessel is going to be put on the armor. As you can see, it only has a single large thruster and 4 supporting small thrusters. So this ship is not going to be chasing away any other corvettes or small ships. It's meant to, at least what I discovered from flying it, to stay in formation with the heavier ship that is supporting it and basically fend off the smaller attackers. Now, it is a narrow target. As you can see, it has a long thin hull, and it can fight from the broadsides, but ideally what you want to do is point out the nose towards the enemy and have all of the turrets open up on the small ships, completely obliterating them. Now, the author has paid really close attention to the profile of the vessel. As you can see, the retro thrusters, which are basically in every design that you make, they're gonna be the weakest point. They're embedded really close and tight towards the hull, as well as with the attitude thrusters, which are not many. So as you can imagine, you won't be able to maneuver a lot with the vessel, but the gyroscope bank on the ship actually enables it to track really well. So you need to think of this vessel, at least the way I used it, that I found it was successful, as a heavy floating turret. So you're going to have a heavy platform for turrets that is going to be defending its main carrier or ship to escort, and it's going to bring that immense firepower to bear, but it's not going to be able to, displace itself around too much. Now, why do I say that? Although this ship has a jump drive, as you can see here, which is characteristic of what we classify as corvettes, which are the smallest ship that can go out into, FTL, hyperspace, whatever you want to call it. But, as I was saying, this ship is meant to be supported by a larger vessel for one main reason. It doesn't have a med bay, it only has a single oxygen tank, it has a single cryopod, and it has no internal atmosphere. Now, you can easily retrofit these upgrades into the ship. But the truth is, in a vessel this size and for this task, you basically don't need that. Now you can replenish any ammunitions or maybe spare parts that you need from this bottom connector here, and then perform the repairs from the main ship that is supporting it. You could even have 2 or 3 of these, and that leads me to one of the main points that I want to discuss in this video, is that this type of vessel is the one that you're going to be finding in multiplayer servers, especially in faction war servers. This is going to be the most common type of ship. It's a ship that is relatively cheap. It has high performance in the way of firepower, and it's very well armored. It doesn't have any moving parts, it doesn't have any complex components. You're basically putting everything on the offensive or on the defensive, and you leave the logistics to the base or to the carrier that you build. And I am saying this because it's relatively rare to encounter ships that are larger than a frigate. Basically, destroyers and cruisers, and not even battleships, are going to be extremely rare in multiplayer servers, unless you play in, with a dedicated faction of many players. And that leads us to the other point that I want to discuss here, and is the amount of people that you find in a server, or the most precious resource that you're going to find in any server, which are the players. And as you can see from what I just showed you on the inside, the ship has a single cockpit that is very well enclosed in what you can consider this big coffin or sarcophagus of heavy armor. And I have to say something, this enclosure is really durable, but it's still susceptible to the freaky type of spazzing out damage that you get when things like rockets, for example, start facing through armor and appearing inside of the ship and exploding, or maybe dislodging blocks on the inside and then hitting your cockpit from underneath. Now, onto the constructor criticism. I really like this design. There's barely a few changes that I would make to the ship, and those are mostly preferential, but the one that I do want to point out that I think is a must, and I want to say this to Bored Arsonist, is of course related to gyroscopes. As you can see here, you take out that block, one floating gyro, and that floating gyro leads us to another one, and the ones next to them. Now, I didn't record that, but I did have an incident in which the entire gyroscope bank was dislodged from heavy damage to the underside. I was rammed by an enemy fighter. As you know, the AI in this game is not perfect. Sometimes, especially the fighters that you're going to encounter with for example, the vanilla Argentavis, they're basically glorified torpedoes, and if you manage to catch one of these in the belly, as here, basically that's the end for this ship. So this is the only thing that I want to stress out. The only thing that is a must change for me in this design is quite an easy fix. As you can see here, you have plenty of space to attach those gyros. If I show you, of course, I mean, it's just changing out those conveyors by square ones and then adding the gyros on top. What this does is it changes the attachment point of the gyro from a point of armor or a block of armor that is surely going to get damaged because it's on the exterior, and the exterior blocks are the most likely ones to be destroyed. So you can lose this armor and still remain with the gyros attached. But you may have a perfectly functioning gyro. You lose the armor in which the gyro is attached, and you're going to have a really hefty block floating around, taking out all of the contents of the interior of your ship. Now, I did make my own version of this vessel, and as I'm going to show you here, basically the main change that it did to it was the composition of the armor. I analyzed the footage of my repeated testings of this ship and identified a damage pattern which I'm going to try to reproduce here. And it's really obvious. Nothing out of the structure, so you're gonna have the diagonal blocks, which are the ones that protrude, are the ones that took the most damage. And when it comes to the nose and the chin, the first thing to get taken out, as you saw in the intro video, was the rocket launcher. There was nothing to do about it. I mean, it's the nose of the ship that goes into the fight first, and then this lower section here. Now, with that damage pattern, what I tried to do was keep the heavy armor in those locations, and then replace the rest of the ship with light armor. I did this using Midspace's amazing toolbox. It's easier to do that way. And that also gives you a little bit of a boost when it comes to maneuvering. Now, there are some parts of the ship that really don't need to be heavy armor. For example, these lovely wings here. It's kind of like vertical wings. I really like the designs, so I really want to keep that. But they don't need to be heavy armor. I mean, they're not protecting the thruster as much as you think, especially since the ship is designed to be, like I said before, facing towards the enemy. You're always going to be covering this, and even light armor is going to be covered enough for it. So I changed them to light armor, and I also decided to give the ship a little bit more maneuvering besides the fact that it's lighter. So I added these 2 extra thrusters. I equalized that thrust on the sides. So I wanted to give the wing a feature, like like some vernier modules. So I added those thrusters. I also added cameras. I mean, I have to note that the original ship doesn't have cameras because it's a work in progress. He's actually updating his ship, so I don't know where he's going to put the cameras in the end, but I decided to place one here as a navigation bridge and one here on the nose. Now, like I said, I mean, this combo of rocket launcher and camera is going to be taken out first, but it's a first strike weapon. I mean, you need to achieve first strike with it, so you might as well have a camera. Now, the second, let's say, major change that I did to his design was I added our signature self-repair system, and this is really useful. I mean, in creative it's almost overpowered. In survival, it's gonna let you at least double the endurance in battle of the ship. I have done testings in survival, and you can actually weld back components that you get that they get damaged. I added self-repair systems for absolutely every single turret. They don't look that well because you have this exposed welder, so it's a choice. I did discover that this ship, as it comes, can take out a wave of fighters. I tested this against an amazing mod by Arara, the creator of the Invaders mod. I'm gonna put a link to the description too. So the ship can take a wave, but after that, the main hull is relatively intact, but it loses all of the turrets, or the majority of the turrets, to a point in which is, let's say, combat ineffective. It cannot go on the offensive. So you basically need this. You need to have those welders stocked with some, pieces to build these turrets back, like motors, tubes, stuff like that. It's not a big deal. So, like I said, I added that self-repair system, and that gives you at least the endurance to resist 2 waves. I didn't want to push it because it's not going to be realistic in a survival server, or even in a co-op, server with your friends. You're not going to be able to basically infinitely, repair this ship. So at least one more wave of fighters is enough. Now, I didn't do any changes to the interior, to the command section of the ship. Basically, it's the same. What I changed was the guts in the belly. I moved the 2 timers up here, and this habitational cargo space remains the same, but I did change the bottom, and I'm going to show you how. I relocated some of the crucial components that I thought they were too close to the nose. For example, that beacon got moved a little bit back. Most importantly, and that's another point that I would like to stress, reactors. Reactors in this position can be a hazard. They get taken out either by collisions or extensive damage to the turrets, because you know damage leaks in this game. Also, depending on the settings of the server that you're playing, if you get a reactor to burst and you have that uranium ingot floating around, it's gonna tunnel through a ship and it's gonna come out the other end. So you don't want that. Of course, the gyros, I already talked about it. But in my version, I tried to space them out a little bit more, as you can see there. And I added these extra thrusters, and I placed the reactors that I removed, the 3 reactors that I removed here, as well as the oxygen tank a little bit back. So everything is basically, you will have to destroy the entire nose of the ship, and you still have a functioning vessel. Even if you take out the entire nose, the ship can go, escape or run away and repair the nose, and the nose is relatively cheap. So after all those changes, let's see how it behaves in combat.